The first crack appeared before anyone raised their voice. It happened in the church hall, under warm yellow lights that made everything look softer than it really was. White ribbons hung from the chairs. My cousin's wedding rehearsal was supposed to be a simple, happy thing. Laughter floated easily. People spoke over one another. I stood near the back, holding my phone, smiling when I was supposed to. I had always been good at that smiling on cue. My aunt found me there, away from the noise. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Her hands trembled just slightly as she reached into her purse. When she spoke my name, her voice sounded thinner than usual, as if it had passed through something sharp. "This is for you," she said. She pressed a small sealed envelope into my palm. It was plain, no writing. No decoration, just heavy enough that I noticed. Before I could ask anything, my cousin noticed us. She walked over in her ivory heels, laughing already, the kind of laugh meant to be shared. "What's that?" she asked, tilting her head. "Nothing," my aunt replied too quickly. My cousin plucked the envelope from my hand before I could stop her. She shook it once, then rolled her eyes. "Probably old papers or something," she said, loud enough for the others to hear. "Auntie and her junk, don't fill her head with nonsense right before my wedding." A few people laughed. Not cruelly, casually, as if that made it harmless. My aunt didn't argue. She just reached out and gently took the envelope back from my cousin's fingers, then returned it to me. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. There was something there. Fear, maybe, or apology, or both. "Keep it," she whispered. "Please." Then she turned and walked away. I stood frozen, the envelope warm in my hand, my smile fading too slowly. No one noticed. They were busy discussing flower arrangements and seating charts. I slipped the envelope into my bag like it was something fragile. I didn't open it that night. I wish I could say I trusted my instincts, but the truth is, I trusted my family more than myself. I told myself my cousin was probably right. I told myself not everything meant something. I told myself I was imagining the weight of it. Growing up, I learned early how to stay small, to not question too much, to accept what I was given, and to be grateful even when it hurt. I was the quiet one, the easy one, the one who didn't ask for explanations. That night, as the rehearsal dinner carried on, I watched carefully. I noticed how conversations stopped when I entered the room. I noticed how my aunt avoided sitting near the rest of them. I noticed how my cousin kept glancing at my bag, then quickly away. None of it was loud, none of it was dramatic. But it was there, like a draft in a closed room. When I got home, I placed the envelope on my bedside table. I didn't open it, I didn't sleep either. The next morning, instead of going to the salon with the others, I went to the bank. It wasn't planned. I just woke up with a tightness in my chest that wouldn't leave. The envelope sat on the passenger seat beside me as I drove, untouched, like it was waiting for permission. Inside the bank, everything smelled clean and quiet. I approached the counter, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I felt. "I just need to check something," I said, sliding the envelope across. The manager opened it carefully. His expression changed so slowly I almost missed it. He didn't speak at first. He checked the documents once. Then again, finally, he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Miss," he said softly, "this account shouldn't exist." The room went silent. And in that silence, I understood this wasn't a mistake. It was a secret, and secrets, I was beginning to realize, were never kept for the person they belonged to. I left the bank without asking questions. That surprised me more than anything else. The manager had offered to explain, had gestured toward his office, but something in me had already gone very still. Not cold, not angry, just quiet. I nodded, thanked him, and told him I would return after the wedding. He seemed relieved by that, which told me more than words ever could. On the drive back, I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I let the silence stretch until it stopped feeling heavy and started feeling useful. By the time I arrived at the venue, the rehearsal chaos had turned into celebration again. Dresses steamed, hair curled, champagne glasses clinked. Everyone looked lighter than they had the day before except my aunt. She sat alone near a window, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. When she saw me, her shoulders dropped slightly, like she had been holding them up on purpose. "You went," she said. "It wasn't a question." I nodded. "I didn't open it until this morning." Her mouth tightened, not in relief, but in something closer to resignation. "They told me you wouldn't," she said quietly. "They said you'd bring it to them first." That was the first time she said they. We were interrupted before I could ask who she meant. My cousin appeared again, glowing, laughing, already telling a story about how stressful weddings were. She didn't look at my aunt. She didn't look at me for long either. "Did you figure out what that envelope was?" she asked lightly, fixing an earring in the mirror. "Not yet," I replied. It was true, and it was enough. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. That day passed in fragments. A compliment here, a joke there. But beneath it all, I felt the tension, thin and constant, like a wire pulled too tight. I noticed things I had been trained not to notice. I noticed how my uncle spoke over my aunt when money came up. I noticed how the word inheritance was used like a punchline. I noticed how decisions about my future were discussed in past tense. No one confronted me. No one asked me directly what I knew. Instead, they watched, they adjusted, they tested the edges of my silence. And I let them. That was new for me. Growing up, I had believed that love meant transparency, that if something mattered, it would be said out loud. But sitting there, surrounded by family who smiled easily and withheld carefully, I realized how much of my life had been shaped by things left unsaid. That night, my aunt knocked on my hotel door. She didn't come in. She stood in the hallway, voice barely above a whisper. "They made me sign things," she said, "years ago. They said it was for the family, for balance." She looked older than I had ever seen her. "I asked them to tell you," she continued. "They said it would only confuse you, that you didn't need to know. And you believed them. I asked gently." She shook her head. I believed I didn't have a choice. I thought of all the times I had said the same thing, just without words. After she left, I finally opened the envelope again. I read every line slowly. I didn't Google. I didn't speculate. I let the truth arrive in pieces. The account wasn't large in the way movies make dramatic. It wasn't sudden wealth or shocking numbers. What made it unsettling was something else entirely. It was old. It had been maintained carefully, and it had been kept from me on purpose. I understood then that the betrayal wasn't about money. It was about control, about deciding, quietly and collectively, that I didn't deserve to choose. The realization didn't hurt the way I expected. There was no sharp pain, no tears. Just a deep, steady ache like discovering a room in your house that everyone else knew about but you. The wedding happened the next day. I smiled, I hugged, I danced when asked, but inside, something had shifted. I was no longer waiting to be included. I was watching, and in that watching, I began to understand exactly who my family thought I was, and exactly who I was no longer willing to be. I returned to the bank 3 days after the wedding. The city felt quieter once the celebration was over, like the world had exhaled. I walked in alone this time, carrying the envelope and a calm I didn't recognize yet, but trusted anyway. The same manager met me at the counter. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how the wedding went. He led me straight to his office and closed the door carefully behind us. "I've reviewed the records," he said, placing a folder on the desk. "This account was created over 20 years ago." I listened without interrupting. "It was opened in your name. he continued, but with restrictions added later. Not legally invalid ones, just creative. Creative. That word stayed with me. The account had been designed to sit quietly, untouched unless very specific conditions were met. Conditions no one had ever bothered to explain to me. It required consent mine, consent that had never been requested because it had been assumed I wouldn't ask. The manager hesitated before speaking again. Several inquiries were made about this account over the years. He said, "From members of your family, none of them were authorized." I nodded slowly. It felt strange how little anger I felt. Maybe because I finally had confirmation. Maybe because my pain had already done its loudest work in silence. Why wasn't I notified? I asked, he sighed, because the contact information was redirected. I didn't need him to explain further. The truth settled in gently, like dust after a door closes, no dramatic reveal, no confrontation, just clarity. When I left the bank, I didn't call anyone. I walked instead, past shops, past people who had nothing to do with me. I thought about how many decisions had been made on my behalf, how often my quiet nature had been mistaken for permission. That evening my cousin called. Her voice was sweet, concerned. "You've been distant." She said, "I just want to make sure everything's okay. We're family, you know." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I finally heard what she was really asking. I answered carefully, "I'm fine." There was a pause, a recalculation. "If there's something you want to talk about," she said, "we can talk, no secrets." I imagined telling her everything. The bank, the account, the redirected letters. I imagined the look on her face, and then I imagined myself afterward exhausted, exposed, still explaining. "I don't think that would help," I said. The call ended politely, coolly. Over the next few days, messages came in waves. Casual questions, old memories, offers of help that arrived too late to be sincere. No one accused me. No one apologized either. They were waiting, so I did something no one expected. I met with a lawyer. Not to threaten, not to reclaim, just to understand. Understanding, I learned, is its own kind of power. The lawyer confirmed what the bank had implied. The account existed because someone once wanted to protect me, and others had worked very hard to make sure that protection never reached me fully. It wasn't illegal. It was intentional. That distinction mattered. I thought of my aunt signing papers she didn't agree with. I thought of myself accepting explanations I never questioned. I thought of how easily silence can be shaped into obedience. The realization didn't harden me, it clarified me. I wrote letters instead of making calls, short ones. Neutral, informative, I acknowledged the account. I stated that I was aware of its history. I explained that I would be making decisions independently from now on. No accusations, no emotion, just facts. The responses were immediate. Confusion, hurt, denial, but beneath all of it was something unmistakable. Fear, not of losing money, of losing influence. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Because for the first time, the truth was no longer something being kept from me. It was something I held quietly, firmly, and entirely on my own terms. The change didn't announce itself. There was no dramatic fallout, no family meeting, no raised voices. What came instead was distance, soft, gradual, unmistakable. Invitations slowed, messages became formal. Concern turned into caution, and for the first time in my life, I didn't chase after any of it. I returned to the bank one last time, not to withdraw anything, not to move funds or close doors with a slam. I adjusted what needed adjusting. I restored my own contact information. I removed permissions that had never felt like mine to begin with. The manager smiled then, just briefly, not impressed, respectful. Outside, I sat on a bench and let the sun warm my hands. I thought about how much energy, I had spent trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I didn't feel victorious, I felt light. My aunt called a week later. Her voice sounded steadier. "They're angry," she said. "I know," I replied. "They say you've changed." I smiled to myself. "I hope so." She exhaled long and slow. "I'm proud of you." It was the first time anyone in my family had said that without conditions attached. We met for tea the following weekend. No paperwork, no secrets, just two women speaking honestly for the first time. She told me things she had been afraid to name. I listened without rushing her. We didn't rewrite the past, but we stopped pretending it hadn't happened. As for the rest of them, I let things settle where they landed. When my cousin finally confronted me, it wasn't in anger. It was in confusion. "You could have told us," she said. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who had always assumed access was a right. "I could have," I said gently, "but I wasn't required to." She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I need one. I didn't cut anyone off. I didn't make speeches. I simply stopped explaining myself. I declined conversations that felt manipulative. I accepted silence when it arrived. Over time, something unexpected happened. The tension faded. Without resistance to push against, it had nowhere to live. The account remained where it was, not as a symbol of wealth, but of choice. I didn't rush to use it. I didn't need to. Knowing it existed, untouched and honest, was enough. It represented something far more valuable than money. Proof that my voice mattered, even when I hadn't used it. At night, I slept without rehearsing conversations in my head. I stopped bracing myself before family gatherings. I learned that peace isn't something you negotiate for. It's something you allow when you stop asking permission to be yourself. The lesson arrived quietly, the way the most important ones do. Boundaries don't require anger to be real. Strength doesn't need an audience, and dignity is often mistaken for silence by those who never learned to listen. I didn't win anything that day at the bank. I reclaimed something much smaller and much harder to take away. My sense of self, and in that I found a calm that no one else could touch.